Always find joy in the smallest of things. That is what we found in you. Oh, 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 you are joy. Never give up when the going gets rough. Hope is everything you need. Oh.
Hi, I'm really glad to be with you. My name is Sue Levin, and I am a licensed professional counselor, licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm the executive director of HGI Counseling. We're also known as the Houston Galveston Institute, and we're a nonprofit organization that does counseling and trains mental health professionals. We were founded in 1978, so we've been doing this work for over 40 years, and I've been with the organization almost that long. I started as a therapist and learned how to both do therapy, supervise clinicians, and became a faculty member and now an administrator. And I'm very excited to be with you and talk about what we do at HGI. Let's see, we have services and offices in both the greater Houston area as well as in Fort Bend County. We started in Galveston as an outgrowth of a team working in the medical center at UTMB. This group started family therapy practices in the South Texas area, one of the first groups in the country to do family therapy. And at UTMB, they were out of the child psychiatry department. Family therapy was a radical idea when they started in the 1950s, and started working as a team with patients who were struggling with issues that had them hospitalized. And they began understanding problems as occurring in a context. And family therapy was developing all across the country and across the world. And these were the early beginnings of that approach, inviting in other people who are involved in trying to help children cope with issues and problems, but sometimes also helping in ways that were maintaining the problem rather than resolving it. So family therapy really engaged the family and then started expanding as well, because systems, not just the family systems, get involved when a kid is in trouble. That includes schools. It includes other systems like sometimes probation, the legal system, protective services when there's issues around abuse and neglect, and all the helpers, people who are hoping to take care of and assist with problems that show up in kids, sometimes can be in conflict with each other, like parents who are taking different approaches or can't agree on how to parent a child, which creates a situation that can add to or complicate a problem. And then this can also happen among helpers outside the family. So when a school support person, a counselor, a teacher, and a family get at odds with each other, or when a caseworker from protective services or other organizations have different agendas and are not able to work together on the same page, you end up with a chaotic system, which makes resolving issues more difficult. HGI has been looking at these kinds of systemic issues for many, many years, and developed an approach actually in the 1980s called problem-determined systems, which then evolved to language systems, because what we started looking at was sometimes the problem wasn't really in the inherent inside a person or in their psychic system and the individual system, but it was an issue that came up as people started talking to each other. And so how can we understand what the meanings are and the language is that people are using as they're trying to work out and support and resolve problems? And these things only get worked out and resolved in language, in conversation with each other. So who's talking about the problem? Who's trying to help resolve the problem? And how are they doing it? What are they saying? Who are they talking to? And how can we engage all the people who are relevant to this system in bringing in resources? There are a lot of different programs out there that look and think about these things these days. But early on, as I said, originally back in the 50s and then into the 80s, the people at HGI, our founders, our faculty have been practicing and thinking about these things. And today, our current approach has evolved and is now called collaborative therapy. So collaborative therapy was originally named and labeled as far ago as the 1990s. Harlene Anderson, one of our founders and a continued faculty member, board member, and thought leader at HGI, but also around the world, has written books now about this, and there are many published articles in the literature. We have our own journal called the International Journal of Collaborative and Dialogic Practices, which I think is getting ready to publish its 11th edition of the journal, and it's bilingual in English and Spanish. And we're also part of an organization that's international and provides training in these approaches, and that's a collaborative certificate program called the International Certificate in Collaborative and Dialogical Practices. And there are 16 different centers around the world that are part of this international network. Both in the United States, we have 2 programs at the moment. There are 3 programs in Mexico. There are programs in Brazil, Argentina, Peru, Ecuador. I know I'm going to miss some of them. Colombia. There are programs in Europe, in the Czech Republic, in Norway. There are programs in China that are very popular as well, in China and Taiwan. And so these programs are great opportunities for us as a community to learn from each other, to practice in different ways, and to share ideas, both through conferences that we co-host every 2 years, as well as through our journal. And then with our actual training programs, HGI has been offering a 20-month intensive training in collaborative and dialogical practices through this network, and just completed our 5th cohort. And this is a group of, I believe we had 22 people who participated in every other month seminars, 2 days a month, or 2 days every other month, excuse me, coming together and having workshops, having dialogue, and practicing together. People who are therapists, but also educators, administrators, people who are interested in bringing collaborative and dialogical practices into different organizations, into their own communities. Our focus has been around how do we talk with each other? What kind of language do we use? And we've come to call this dialogical practice, meaning that in dialogue, what we're doing is really trying to explore our conversation with each other rather than monologue. And what I mean by that is we often are talking to hear our own thoughts and to share our own thoughts without inviting the other person's ideas and responses to influence us. So monologues are when we are stuck with an idea that we're trying to convey to somebody else, and it may come across more as giving advice, sharing something that we're trying to convince the other person about. Whereas a dialogue is an opportunity and an invitation to explore things together, to create a conversation where we are learning together, where we're exploring together. And it's not necessarily just two people, but rather it's a process or a philosophy really about how we can explore and engage with each other to create new ideas and new meaning, new solutions if we're talking about issues and problems, and come up with new ways of understanding and approaching things. So many of our conversations and the responsibility of us as facilitators of those conversations or as mental health professionals are to ask questions that are open-ended and that invite our clients to share their ideas and create space for clients, whether that's an individual client, a family, a group, or even an organization that we're consulting with, to talk about their ideas in ways that maybe they haven't had opportunities to do before, to create openings and space for them to think out loud about things that maybe they haven't felt comfortable sharing with other people and that they've been holding in their heads. And sometimes these inner conversations end up becoming problematic. We could think about people even to the extreme of people who may have conversations in their heads with others that become called psychosis, and that these are things that they are not able to share with other people because other people get scared when they hear them. Other people shut down those ideas and those concerns when they hear them from a loved one, when they hear them from a friend, or maybe even when they hear them from a client. Some therapists are trained not to support and make space for those conversations to happen because as a society, we've been taught that these are abnormal and not appropriate conversations. But what happens, and one of the things that we have found and really are exploring, not just ourselves, but there's a big movement, especially in Europe, but also around the world, called open dialogues, back to dialogical practices, where especially people, if you can start working with them at the early onset of what's considered psychosis and create space and support for them to be able to share these ideas, that they can be successful at adapting and moving out of what can become a real difficult situation if they're not allowed to or given space to express these things. So once you are shut down, and as I said, it's typically by people who are well-meaning but scared and don't know how to handle and engage with people who are having this very scary experience themselves. So once they feel like they can't have these conversations, they go inside and they become conversations that happen internally rather than externally. And the more they are internalized, the stronger they get. The more that they're unable to let these things out, just like all kinds of feelings and experiences that we have that are disturbing, like anxiety or fear or trauma. If we're not able to share these with other people, they can become more and more powerful and more difficult for us to manage. They add to isolation. I'm probably talking to people who have these experiences, right? Or have worked with people with these experiences. So I don't want to belabor the point, but it's really important. And one of the big things that we find most valuable about our work is in creating places for people to talk about things, again, that they may not have shared with others before, or if they've shared them, that they have been discouraged from talking about them or told that they're inappropriate. These can also include feelings about suicide, for example. A lot of people are not given space to talk about feelings when they have them about suicide. So when therapists work with clients who feel suicidal, sometimes the very first thing that they do is ask them to make a contract not to attempt suicide, not to explore this issue. They are, they are brought into a more technical conversation around signing agreements or making agreements, which stop the conversation rather than asking clients, tell me how you got to this point, and giving space around helping them air the pain and the suffering, which is very difficult for people sometimes to hear, certainly for family, certainly for friends. And for those people who have had these feelings and not have anybody to talk to about it, going to a therapist may be the first time they really are hoping to have that conversation and to get some help around it, where the response of, I'm going to need you to sign this agreement or to make an agreement with me that you're not going to attempt suicide, may be a very difficult shift from what I really wanted to talk to you about, which is that I'm feeling really stuck and I'm feeling really lonely and I'm feeling really hopeless and I don't know what to do about it, and I really want to connect with somebody who can talk with me about what will help me in this struggle that I'm having. So again, creating space for these conversations is what our therapists are really good at, and our network of therapists who are trained in this collaborative and dialogical approach. Again, we are offering trainings, as are many organizations around the world, and we also have literature and participate in workshops and trainings, invited to speak at conferences and those sorts of things, where we can offer this way of being to other people. I'm trying to think about how to share what we're doing, though, on a more local level, because I think there may be people in Texas, people in Fort Bend and Harris County who may be interested. And so I think I'll shift and talk a little bit about that, if that's okay. So our work in our offices has been disrupted a little bit, as many have been, by COVID. And so luckily, we have been doing online and remote therapy for many, many years. Before there were regulations, before there was a lot of technology that made it possible, we were working with people over the telephone, We were working with people because access to services is something that's always been important and really one of our missions at HGI. We went out and did home-based therapy for years as we were, as I said, really focused on family systems and how to work with a whole family system, and working with Children's Protective Services where clients couldn't get to us. And, therapists for a long time have operated in our little offices and expected everybody to come on our schedule to our places of work and operate within our comfort level and our boundaries. But that's a really privileged position. And therapists who really want to serve the community have to find other ways to do that. HGI has done a lot of disaster response, and another thing that we did going way back to after, let's see, I guess it was Tropical Storm Allison in Houston, we were working alongside the Red Cross in Red Cross shelters, providing mental health support to people who had just experienced loss because of hurricanes, but also to the Red Cross workers who were hearing terrible, difficult stories, first responders as well. So we've been doing this for a long time, but I'm really wanting to emphasize how important it's been to us to experiment with different ways and different places to work. So one of the innovative things that we were able to do after Hurricane Katrina, in addition to working in a mega shelter and helping run the mental health services at the George R. Brown Convention Center several times, not just after Katrina, but also after Harvey and other disasters, is that we got a mobile mental health unit. We were funded out of an organization called AmeriCares, actually, to purchase a 32-foot recreational vehicle and outfit it to provide services, because so many of the, I'll call them refugees, evacuees who were moved to Houston after Katrina hit New Orleans were people who didn't know how to navigate Houston, people who often were using public transportation in New Orleans, and the public transportation system in Houston, where they were housed after Katrina, where they were moved, was not available. You really have to have a car to get around the Houston area. And many of the folks who were sent here were really stuck in apartment complexes with very little resources and very little opportunity to get out and get to what they needed. So our mobile unit would go and visit the different apartment complexes, and our therapists worked on the unit, and the residents began to understand that we were there to help. And we also brought the unit to schools where many of the children who were displaced to Houston got schooling. So that's just another one of the ways that we have adapted and are flexible to meet the needs of the community and provide access. But back to COVID and what's going on now, we've been doing teletherapy, we've been doing remote services as well for many years. And when Texas instituted some guidelines and requirements for mental health providers, I believe it was about 5 years ago, including that people needed to be trained to provide services, we started offering training in teletherapy to Texas mental health providers. So HGI has been doing that for a while, and then when COVID happened, we offered free training for mental health providers. We have lots of resources, and of course our therapists already were trained, and we offered our own therapists supervision and support as we all pivoted to provide services to our own clients. This includes working with schools, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. We've done work in schools since the beginning of the Institute, which is over 40 years, as I mentioned. So again, not expecting clients to always come to us and to always show up in our offices. We know that having therapists on site in the community is one of the best ways to make therapy accessible and part of the community services, part of the systems that they're already operating in. So schools is one place where obviously mental health services are really helpful and supportive and can take the burdens off of the schools, off of families who can't always participate or get their children to therapy after hours. But in schools, we can go in and partner with the schools and create a resource and a partnership. And that's something we've done with many different organizations, community youth services, communities in schools. These are national organizations, and then also directly with school districts. So right now we are working in Fort Bend County with the Lamar Consolidated Independent School District and have expanded over the years. Not a lot of years. We've started, I think, 4 years ago with one therapist part-time in a high school in Lamar Consolidated. And right now we have, I think it's 18 therapists working in almost every school in the district through partnerships with the school and funding with local foundations. And this expansion was rapid and particularly due in the last year to knowing that COVID has added stressors to all the kids, all the families in the district, and that is going to continue as schools are adapting and having to fill needs academically as well as emotionally, socially, and psychologically for kids who've had a lot of trauma and families who've had a lot of trauma and losses in the last year. So we do work, we continue to do work online. We are beginning to look at working back in our offices as the risk levels are going down, people are getting vaccinated, but we expect to continue offering services online because frankly, they are very convenient. People don't have to take off and drive to an office to get services. If they have a private place, they can do it from their office and their job. They can do it from home. They can do it from their car if they don't have a private office or space in their home. And it cuts down time and expense for those people who may have to take, a cut time off from their job to go and participate in therapy. So we found that this can be a very useful way to provide services. It also helps, especially when we are needing to engage multiple family members, couples in therapy. And, we do offer services in the evenings and on Saturdays, which makes things more convenient. But at the same time, having people being able to join from different locations, maybe families where they live in different households because of divorce and separation. We can bring everybody together to help their kids to resolve family issues using technology in a way that makes things a lot easier on everybody. So we do expect to do that going into the future, and as I said, can train other organizations that are wanting to use these technologies in working with their clients and supporting them through and beyond the pandemic. Let's see, what haven't I gotten to that's important to share about our work? Mind-body medicine and wellness workshops. So one thing that we have done as part of our disaster response, but has continued in our work, in all of our clinical work, is that many of us have been trained by the Center for Mind-Body Medicine in doing mind-body skills work and wellness workshops. And what that means is that we've studied how trauma and stress have impacted our nervous systems and our health in ways that we don't always pay attention to and recognize, and how the ways that we think about ourselves, the ways that we manage our stress are really impactful to our health, and vice versa. So we can improve our health outcomes, for example, blood pressure, diabetes, our immune system, by taking care of ourselves and practicing some very simple wellness and self-care tools, simple breathing techniques, and doing these on a daily basis for 10 minutes a day, for 20 minutes a day, taking care of how we eat and being mindful of how we make choices, not just about food, for example, but also about how we schedule our time, how we take care of our relationships and take care of ourselves. A simple example is not hurrying through getting dressed every day just to get started with our day, but taking the time to pay attention to the little things, the really taking the time. Ask your dentist about how you should really brush your teeth. It can take a little bit longer than what you may rush through to do that, and allowing yourself to take care of that for your health and wellness, allowing yourself the rituals of doing the self-care each day, before bed, for example. How many people really have trouble going to sleep or sleeping well because of carrying around stress and worry? And mindfulness helps us let go and recognize what we can really do something about. And when you're trying to go to sleep, you really can't do anything about something that's due to your work the next day, unless you decide to get up and take care of it, right? So why worry about it if you're trying to go to sleep? We have to find ways, and our wellness workshops teach these things, and we bring them into all of our work when our clients and our colleagues are dealing with some of the same issues. All of us have our own issues that can become problematic as we ignore ourselves. And as helpers, that's often an issue for us. We're so used to taking care of other people and not putting ourselves first. And that can mean that we're not good at taking care of our own stuff and dealing with our own stress. And that can get in the way for us. So first we have to know how to take care of ourselves before we can really take care of other people, or we're going to run out of the energy and the compassion and the care and resources that we have to give other people. So self-care is a critical piece. And again, what's tied into it is health and wellness. So we have to be healthy. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to sleep well. We need to move and eat well and breathe, and yes, all of the things that are important. And we can help our clients, our families, our friends when we know those skills, when we practice those skills ourselves and can share them with others. So that's something we've started doing. Again, we got trained over the years, and there's quite a few people in the Houston area, I think we're at 200 now, who've been trained in this approach, and HGI has quite a few of our staff who've had the training. I've become a faculty member of the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, and I help train other people, but I also facilitate groups and workshops. And HGI has a program now that's called the Whitetail Wellness Program that is for Fort Bend County and organizations in Fort Bend who can get trained for their staff and the organization so that the helpers can continue doing the best work that they can possibly do as they both take care of themselves and take care of their clients. Yes?
Can you let us know how would I pay for this? So do I need to pay if I come and get a counselor through HDI?
Oh, great question. So the question about payment, both for training, for wellness programs and workshops, and for clients who want counseling services, is as simple as let's work it out. So often we have funding that's going to cover a portion of the cost or the full fee. So for counseling, we do have a sliding scale, and it's based on clients' income. And you just come and tell us, or call and tell us, what your income is, what you think you can afford. Because even clients who have decent income often have other financial constraints. And we take that into account. We work with you, and we do have clients who come in on a pro bono basis, meaning they pay nothing, but also low fee. And for those who can afford it, we're happy to accept your regular full fees as well, because that helps us offset those other discounts that we offer. And again, luckily, we're very grateful to have support from foundations and donors that allow us to offer these programs and counseling at no cost and low cost as well. So just call and ask us. A lot of our information about our programs are available on our website, which is hgicounseling.org, hgicounseling.org, and you can look up information there, but also about how to contact us if you have questions.
Hello, my name is Rick Trimp. I'm the president of Living Works. Living Works is an organization that focuses solely on the issue of suicide. Living Works has been around for 37 years, and we're an organization that teaches our programs and provides services all across the globe. Living Works believes that everybody has a role to play in addressing the issue of suicide. And we have trainings for every one of those roles. We do this with a community development lens, where we believe that anybody in our communities has a role to play in preventing suicide. We believe that these roles change where people live, work, and play. We believe that that it's really important for these roles to be interconnected and to have connections in order to keep people safe from the issue of suicide. We believe in partnerships. We believe in working with other organizations. We believe that Living Works is a key player in that, but we can't do that alone. It's just like the old adage of it takes a community to raise a child. Same thing with suicide prevention, is that it takes a community to keep people safe. Living Works is an organization that really believes in evidence-based approaches. And I want to talk about that for a minute. All of our programs are evidence-based, and this is really important because suicide is a very serious subject matter, and you need to have good evidence-based programs and services in order to effectively address the issue. We have over 50 peer-reviewed journal articles and pieces of evidence that support our programs, and we won't release a program unless it is built in evidence. Living Works has been fortunate enough to train over 2 million people globally, and we're very proud of that, but we believe that we haven't done enough. And so our goal as an organization is to actually do that annually. And that's one of our objectives. It's our mission, is to create safe communities. The issue of suicide is a significant public health challenge. It affects every community, it affects every individual. And people know that suicide is a major issue. And in the United States, for example, 47,000 people took their lives by suicide in 2019. We know that there's significant community impact when that happens with every individual. We know that there's particular demographics that are at greater risk. And it's really important as we talk about approaches to this issue that we take a community look at this. And so I like to say it's really a population issue. It's an issue that takes a population of people to all come together and to help keep people safe. I want to talk a little bit about the Living Works programs. The Living Works programs, as I mentioned, are evidence-based programs, and we take a very evidence-based approach to how we deliver and facilitate our programs. One of the key things that we really believe in is standardization, and through standardization you achieve quality, and that quality aspect to Living Works programs is really job one for us. The programs themselves are designed to train specific roles in our community. And so those roles are skills-based. They're not awareness roles. They're really skills-based roles that create community connection. And so in Living Works, when we have our suite of programs together, we can articulate safety nets, and so people become connected with those individual roles. At Living Works, we call that a network of safety. When we surround the individual who's at risk, when we're creating skills within our community, one of the things that's really important is that we keep people safe for now as they reestablish their hope, and that's a journey. And that's a journey for the individual who's at risk. And so our programs, such as Living Works Start, is an online program. It takes an hour to an hour and a half to complete. It's you can take this program on your iPad, You can take it on your phone, you can take it on your personal computer or your computer at work. It's a program that's been very well accepted, and it's a program that's, once again, evidence-based. That program actually teaches how to identify somebody who might be at risk, and what to do with that individual who's struggling. And so it's a really important skill to be that identifier in our communities, and to know what to do and how to ask that question: are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about dying by suicide? And that's a really difficult question to ask people, but it helps you overcome almost your own personal beliefs, your own personal stigma about that, and really teaches you the importance of asking that question directly. Safe Talk is another one of our programs that's, once again, evidence-based. It's widely used and widely accepted. The Safe Talk really provides the background for suicide alertness. It really develops a skill of intuitive awareness. It's a face-to-face training. It takes about 3 to 4 hours to complete this training, but it really gives you the skill on how to be aware of the surroundings around you, how to be aware of individuals that may be at risk, and it really helps people, identify people who are having thoughts of suicide. Safe Talk is meant for anyone 15 and older who want to promote the issue of suicide alertness, and also really create a mechanism of safety in our communities. Living Works Assist is a 2-day program, and it is intensive training, but it's a really important skill in our communities. Living Works Faith, I want to talk about faith for a minute. It's a new program that we've put out for faith leaders to really develop a skill on how to address the issue of suicide within perhaps their congregations. How to talk about this issue, and how to overcome some of the issues around suicide within our church community. This program is fairly new. It's only about 4 months old, but it's an amazing program that we're very proud to offer to our faith leaders. This program really challenges some of the thinking and creates an environment for study and for self-reflection and prayer. This is one of our important aspects of our community, where people in crisis will actually come to their faith leader, and we want our faith leaders to be skilled around the issue of suicide, so that they know how to address that issue effectively. The program itself takes about 5 to 6 hours of study time. Longer if you really want to go deep into the studying and the reflection piece of this. And we're very proud to offer it as a resource and an ongoing resource to our faith community. With suicide, the opportunity here for all of us is actually to identify a role for ourselves. Living Works really believes that everybody can play a role in our communities. And those roles can be anything from an identifier to somebody who actually intervenes, and everything in between. I want to talk a little bit about the approach that Living Works uses. So I've talked about the programs, I've talked about Living Works as an organization, but really what it comes down to is how do we actually do this? And so Living Works builds strategy with our customers, with our groups that we work with, whether that be a church organization, whether it be a military, or whether it be a school system, construction organizations, health systems. What we do is we come in and actually we help develop the strategy. This is a really important aspect to what we do. Because this could be shaped as a program where it should be easy to implement. It should be an effective approach. And so really important that we establish goals and objectives and really develop an understanding with our client group so that we can come in, tailor our standardized programs to make sure that we're actually meeting the cultural needs of those particular populations of people. We'll never stop suicidal ideation because it is a natural human characteristic, but we believe that we can actually make an impact on stopping suicide loss. And we do that by giving this, not only this training, but also with a view of reestablishing hope for that individual who has lost hope for now. And so it's really important to surround people with a safety net that helps them reestablish hope, helps them go on that journey and have that safety net around them so that when they do fall down below the threshold a little bit, that there's a safety net there to keep them safe and help them along that journey. That's our mission, and that's a really important mission for us. And I hope that I've been able to show you how Living Works goes about doing that. And we'd be more than happy to work with any organization to establish a network of safety within any particular organization.
I started my career as a social worker, and I think that my main goal was trying to find ways to alleviate suffering in the world. I was realizing that people were struggling and a lot of our interventions weren't effective to the extent that I felt was possible. In my social work career, I had specialized in the treatment of trauma-related disorders, and in that process, I had learned that trauma tends to have significant impacts on the brain. And what I was realizing is that a lot of our interventions were not actually getting to those roots. They were focusing on cognitive strategies and things that were really depending on this frontal part of our brain to be functioning properly. And so as a social worker and a psychotherapist, I was incorporating all the skills that I had learned in my schooling and in my practice and doing the very best that I could for the trauma treatment. So I felt like there had to be more. I felt like there were more things that we could do to really get to the issue, help people truly heal. And in that process, I started to do some research into the brain. I realized that trauma tends to have significant impacts on the brain and can even create physical damage over time. So I realized that a lot of our interventions were not actually getting to the root in the brain. We were addressing the cognitive piece and the emotional piece, which are both incredibly important. But if you don't get to the root in the brain, then the symptoms can continue even despite all of that other work. About 5% of our brain is available to our conscious awareness, and about 95% is subconscious. And oftentimes with a history of trauma, that subconscious brain tends to override that 5% of our conscious brain. So I was realizing that a lot of our clients were struggling because they were really trying to implement a lot of these skills that we had taught them and coping strategies. But what would happen is in the moments they actually needed those skills, they were unavailable to them because that part of their brain was being overridden by that limbic system, that emotion center that comes like a flood. It comes on a lot faster and stronger than that frontal conscious part of our brain. So I realized that we needed to find ways to get to that root and be able to speak with the subconscious brain. And that's actually what led me into neurotherapy. I realized that we could actually scan the brain, we could look at the organ we're treating, actually see where the root is, what's going on, and then have a modality that could address those things directly and target these specific regions that needed to be addressed. What I realize is that trauma has significant impacts on the brain and can actually be harmful and damaging to certain areas that are needed for our emotional regulation, for our cognitive processing, for our relationships. And I realized we needed to find ways to really get to those roots and more effectively heal the brain in order to allow the person to heal. So here at Neuro Grove, our first step is always to do a brain assessment. We believe strongly that we need to look at the organ retreating. We need to look inside and see exactly how that person's brain is struggling. I think that's where a lot of conventional medicine and a lot of our conventional mental health approaches are breaking down, in that they're not always getting to the root of the issue. And especially in the mental health field, a lot of times we're not even looking at the organ retreating. We're not seeing what is going on behind the scenes. We're just seeing a set of symptoms, and then we're making educated guesses based off of those symptoms as to which interventions we use, which medications we use. But what we've found is that unfortunately, there's many different phenotypes or brain patterns associated with the same set of symptoms. So for example, things like ADHD. Typically, we tend to see an excess of theta brainwaves in the front of the brain, particularly the anterior cingulate. However, sometimes it's an excess of alpha brainwaves. Sometimes it's an excess of beta brainwaves. Sometimes they might have an excess of theta in the front, which are slower brainwaves, and then beta in the back, which are faster brainwaves. And so in those cases, for the typical theta pattern, things like stimulants, medications, might help to boost that brain activity to speed it up. However, in a lot of cases, that's not going to be the best fit. And in some cases, if you have slow brain waves in one part of the brain, but fast brain waves in another, we really need to be able to move the two different brain regions in two directions. So we have found that neurotherapy can be a really effective method for being able to move certain brain regions up, certain ones down, activate, deactivate, speed up, slow down. We can get very specific to what that particular person's brain needs. So we always start with a brain assessment, and we like to use electrical functional brain imaging because that gives us the most real-time assessment of a person's brain. So this utilizes the EEG technology, which is one of the safest neuroimaging technologies that can be repeatedly used without any harm. And from that EEG, we're able to use a technology called SW Loretta that is able to localize where exactly that activity is coming from, even deeper down in the cortex. And this has been a game changer in the field of neurotherapy because in the past, we were limited to the traditional EEG, which means we could only see the surface level, kind of on that top inch of the cortex. And what we've found is that with the SW Loretta, we're able to get to deeper regions like the amygdala, the thalamus, the posterior cingulate. And those are often the regions that everything's originating from, especially when we're dealing with mental health. Usually it's not that top layer of the cortex that's creating the problem, it's deeper down in the brain. So we utilize SW Loretta 3D functional imaging. And with that technology, we're able to see exactly where the activity is in the brain, where it's stemming from, even deeper down. And then we're able to target those regions directly with the neurotherapy. One of the other benefits of the SW Loretta technology is we're actually able to look at connectivity between regions. And we're finding that connectivity may be as important, if not more important, than the power within certain regions. So the connectivity is the flow of information between brain regions. And we really want to see if there are parts of the brain that are not communicating well, that are deficient in those communication processes. And we can also see if there are regions that are overly dependent on one another. So in this case, a region isn't operating independently enough and it's needing to recruit help from other regions. And both of those processes are going to affect the overall efficiency and effectiveness of the brain processes. Now, if we can look at the connectivity, if we can look at how an entire network within the brain is functioning, then with our neurotherapy technology, we can also target that entire network simultaneously. So this has been a game changer for us because not only can we target a specific brain region that is needing to be healed or balanced, but we can also train multiple brain regions simultaneously and the connectivity between them to address entire networks. And what we're finding in the neuroscience literature is a lot of times mental health issues, especially things like PTSD, tend to be related to the functioning of entire networks, not just single brain regions. Neurofeedback is essentially an advanced form of brain training that utilizes brain-computer interface technology to train the brain toward healthier patterns of functioning. So how we do this is we actually read the brain's activity in real time and then provide feedback with that information, usually in the form of audio and visual cues, to help the brain learn how to function differently and to show it new pathways. So there are many different types of neurofeedback, and we actually incorporate a variety of modalities here. We found that each one kind of has its own benefits and limitations. But the one that we tend to use the most, especially for those dealing with mental health challenges or learning difficulties, is the SW Loretta neurofeedback. This is one of the most recent and most advanced forms of neurofeedback available, and it utilizes the SW Loretta technology to provide that 3D deep brain neurofeedback training. So for this training, we essentially take all of the brain regions and frequencies, as well as all of the connectivity metrics that are outside healthy ranges, and we incorporate that into the brain-computer interface software. Then we connect the person's brain to some type of audio and visual feedback, usually in the form of a movie or music. And it doesn't really matter what kind of movie it is, they get to choose whatever they're motivated to see, but the key piece is that the movie is connected to their brain activity. So with all of the metrics from their brain assessment in our software, I like to imagine it like a globe, where these are all of the metrics that we're training in their brain. And then we're comparing their brain against other individuals their age who are healthy, high-functioning individuals. And we have a range of activity. We're not trying to make everybody exactly the same. But what we found is that when they are within that bell curve range, that's when they tend to feel the best. Whereas when they're outside the range, usually it's associated with a symptom. So I imagine it like this globe where these are all of the metrics in their brain, all the brain regions, connectivity metrics, frequencies, and then this is the healthy range of activity for each of those metrics. So if their brain is starting here, we set a threshold in the software saying, okay, we want all of these brain metrics to come one step closer to that healthy range. And when the brain does so, the movie zooms in and plays. When the brain pops outside that healthy range, the movie zooms out, sound goes out with it. So in the beginning, the brain may not realize that it's connected to the software, but over time it starts to put two and two together, and it realizes that, oh, whenever I do this, the movie zooms in. Whenever I do that, the movie zooms out. I'm going to keep doing more of this. And because the person wants to see the movie, they are trying to bring it full screen, the brain actually interprets that as a reward. And when the brain gets a sense of reward, it actually shoots out dopamine, which draws in these cells that wrap around the new connection and strengthen it. Okay, that's what forms a lot of that myelin sheath. And the thicker that layer becomes, the more automatic that pathway becomes. So over time, with more and more sessions, in the beginning we're taking the brain's hand and we're kind of showing it down a new pathway and rewarding every step of the way. It's kind of like dangling a carrot, and the brain comes this far, we give it a little nibble, then we take it one step further. And we're going to do that with each of those metrics until we get everything within that healthy range. But then we want to do enough sessions that we're really ingraining a new pathway. Because in the beginning, the brain's going to have a hard time finding that path on its own. It needs us to show it there, show it the way. And I see it like a grassy field where the brain is used to taking this pathway, and this pathway may be the long way around, and it may be swampy and stinky and ugly, but it's the only pathway the brain knows, especially if this is something that people have been struggling with for so many years. So with the neurotherapy, we're able to show the brain a new way of functioning, show it a new pathway that is healthier, that is bright and sunny and beautiful and more direct. And when we show the brain down that pathway enough times, we continue to pack it down so that the brain gets to a point where now this becomes the new automatic pathway the brain takes, and the other starts to wither away. So this is how we're getting more long-term effects from the neurotherapy training. And one of the benefits of interventions like this is we're teaching the brain how to do it on its own. A lot of interventions or things like medications, they're coming in and they're doing it for the brain. But if the brain doesn't learn how to do it on its own, then as soon as you take that intervention away, the brain's just going to go back to the pathways it knows. Studies have shown that neurofeedback can actually change both the gray and white matter of the brain. So it's not only changing the function of the brain, it's also changing the structure. And that's what tends to create longer lasting improvements. One of the other interventions we tend to use here at Neuro Grove is neurostimulation. We found that neurostimulation is really great for providing more immediate relief to our clients. So a lot of times, by the time people get to us, they've tried a lot of things and they've been struggling for many years. So they are ready for relief. And what we found is that the neurostimulation can help provide that relief. The way I see it, some types of neurostimulation are kind of like coming in with a wrecking ball, and some of them are kind of like a sledgehammer. But the types that we use, we see them more like chisels. So we're going in, we're seeing exactly what the brain needs, and then we're just kind of nudging it in a different direction, helping it to adjust its activity. So what we've found is that when certain brain regions are overactive, such as those fight or flight centers, we can actually use the neurostimulation to help calm those brain regions faster. Now, oftentimes with stimulation, we tend to think that we are boosting activity, but there are certain types that can actually work with the GABA in the brain to calm it down. So one of the forms of neurostimulation that we use is transcranial direct current stimulation. And with that, we have two electrodes. One of them is the cathode, which is inhibiting, and one is the anode, which is activating. So in cases such as PTSD, we oftentimes will see that the limbic system, the emotion centers of the brain, are overactive, whereas the prefrontal regions, the parts of the brain that are needed for our emotional regulation and a lot of our higher level cognitive processes like thinking, decision-making, planning, those regions tend to be underactive. So with the direct current stimulation, we can actually essentially flip the two, where we're calming down the overactive regions and boosting up the underactive regions. And we can do that more quickly and effectively with the neurostimulation. Okay. We also do another type of neurostimulation called transcranial alternating current stimulation, and that one's really beneficial for putting in certain frequencies that might be deficient in the brain. So for example, we might see that a person has a deficiency of alpha brainwaves in the back of their brain. Alpha generally tends to be this good-feely, relaxed brainwave frequency, and if we're deficient in that, then of course we're going to have a harder time relaxing and feeling good. So sometimes in those cases, we could use the neurostimulation to actually boost those alpha frequencies in the back of the brain using the transcranial alternating current stimulation. In other cases, such as in cases of ADHD, if we see an excess of slow brainwaves in the front of the brain, we can actually help to put in faster brainwave frequencies to speed it up and boost their attention, their focus, their cognitive function, as well as impulse control. Electromagnetic fields affect the body on a cellular level by opening up the membranes. So it's essentially like opening up the windows. And when you do that, you actually allow the oxygen and nutrients to flow into the cell more easily. And you also allow some of the waste and the toxins to come out of the cell. And so what we found with this is, yes, we can use it at particular frequencies according to what each individual's brain needs. So we can help boost certain frequencies that might be deficient or that could just be helpful for stabilizing the brain. But we can also use it to help clean out and help each cell function at its best, because when every cell in a brain region is functioning at its best, then of course that brain region is going to be doing its job at its best. So it's extremely important to get to the root of the issue, and it's my hope that people will realize from this that there are ways that you can see what's at the root of what you're struggling with that is keeping you trapped in your experience, and realize that there is hope to heal.